Welcome to the deep dive. Today, today we're going to be tackling, a question that I think has been on a lot of people's minds these days. Are we living in, like, a more dangerous time than ever before?
Right.
Specifically, we're diving into this whole, like, rising risk of global conflict.
Yeah.
And you've given us some pretty fascinating sources to kind of like work with on this. We've got a research paper that's all about, this whole idea of escalating conflict risk. And then we've also got a transcript from Al Jazeera's Inside Story program.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. They're like talking about, a lot of this stuff that's in this paper. And so by the end of this deep dive, hopefully you'll be able to walk into any conversation about this and feel like really confident. Like you understand not just like the headlines, but like what are the complex factors that are actually at play here?
Yeah, for sure. I think, with everything going on, it can feel really overwhelming with all the information out there.
Right.
So I think it'll be great to kind of break it down.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's jump right in. One of the first things that jumped out at me from this research paper was this statistic from the Institute for Economics and Peace.
Okay.
And it said that there are more countries that are actively engaged in some kind of war right now than at any other point since World War II.
That's a lot.
I know. It's like pretty sobering thought, right?
It is. And I think what makes this era maybe a little different from previous eras, like, say, even the Cold War, is how complex the conflicts are.
Right.
It's not just like two superpowers, facing off against each other. It's, we're seeing state actors and then we're seeing non-state groups and all these regional power struggles.
Yeah.
And so it's a very globalized world. Unfortunately, that means conflict is also globalized.
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, the paper highlighted that 92 countries,
are currently fighting outside of their own borders.
Wow.
So, just think about that.
That's hard to even imagine.
I know, 92. That's a lot of countries.
Yeah.
It really kind of hits home how, interconnected everything is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
If there's a conflict in one part of the world, it can, send these ripples out across economies and political alliances, everywhere.
Yeah.
It's almost like a domino effect.
It is. And so because everything is so interconnected, it makes understanding this risk of conflict even more important.
Right.
Because what might seem like a really distant problem can have very real consequences
Totally.
closer to home for all of us.
For sure. So we've got this whole interconnected web of conflict happening all over the world.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, you add in the fact that global military spending just hit a record high in 2023.
Oh, wow.
Over $2.4 trillion.
That's more money than the entire GDP of most countries.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker. This spending spree has been going on for 9 years straight.
Really?
It's the longest streak on record.
Oh.
So the question is, does all this military buildup actually make us safer?
Right.
Or is it fueling a more dangerous world?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
I know. It's kind of is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, and the research paper doesn't it doesn't shy away from this debate at all. So on the one hand, you have this argument that a strong military deters aggression.
Okay.
That countries need to be prepared to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And this is the logic behind calls to increase NATO spending and things like that.
Right, which you see all over in some of these sources.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, you have this concern that all this military buildup, it's just going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
When everyone is armed to the teeth.
Yeah.
The risk of miscalculation or escalation, that increases.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a really delicate balance.
It is. It reminds me of that saying, if you want peace, prepare for war.
Right, exactly.
But it's are we actually preparing for peace?
Yeah.
Or are we just perpetuating this cycle of fear and aggression?
That's the question.
I know. It's what do you think?
I think it's really important to kind of be aware of both sides of the argument and also to remember that military strength alone that doesn't guarantee peace.
Right.
There needs to be kind of a parallel investment in diplomacy and in things like conflict resolution.
Right.
And even addressing like the root causes of these conflicts in the first place.
Because chucking money at the military while ignoring like all the underlying issues, it's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone.
Exactly.
You know, it might look like you're doing something, but it's not actually going to fix the problem.
Right. Yeah.
And speaking of things that aren't fixing the problem, let's talk about the UN Security Council.
Okay.
It was designed to be this, like, you know, big global peacekeeping body.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, and even in like some of these sources, are saying that it's like failing to live up to its mandate.
Yeah, I think a lot of the criticism stems from the fact that the 5 permanent members, you know, the U.S., U.K., Russia, China, France, they each have veto power.
Right.
That means that any one of them can block action.
Wow.
Even if all the other members of the council agree.
So it doesn't even matter if everyone else is on board.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that leads to, you know, a lot of gridlock.
Yeah.
Especially when the interests
of these really powerful nations, they clash.
So you've got this body that's supposed to, like, be preventing war.
Yeah.
But it can be totally paralyzed by just one country saying no.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if this system is actually working the way it was intended.
Right.
You know, is it time to maybe rethink how the Security Council operates?
Right.
Or are we kind of, like, stuck with this model?
Right. That's a huge question.
It is a big question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answers. You know, some experts, they argue that reforming the Security Council, that's essential to making it more effective and more representative of kind of the current global landscape. But then others worry that any attempt at reform would just open up a whole new can of worms.
Yeah.
And make the council even less functional.
Oh, wow.
It's a very tough problem. Yeah. It sounds like it's like a lot of competing interests.
Exactly.
Yeah. And while we're busy debating how to fix the UN, the world keeps spending this like mind-boggling amount of money on war and all its consequences.
Right.
The research paper said over $19 trillion.
Wow.
In 2023 alone.
That's a lot.
I know, it's crazy. And they also point out that figure is more than 133% of global GDP.
Wow.
So to put that in perspective, imagine taking the entire value of everything that's produced in the world in a year. That's the cost of war.
That's it's a staggering figure.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And then when you consider that only a tiny fraction of that money actually goes towards like peace-building efforts, it really makes you question our priorities as a global society.
It does. It makes you think, what are we doing?
It's like we're pouring gasoline on a fire while hoping someone will like invent a better fire extinguisher.
Exactly.
It's like, it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
And it kind of brings up this like uncomfortable question. Is there actually a financial incentive to keep conflict going?
Yeah.
You know, if war is like this profitable for certain groups, are we ever actually going to see real lasting peace?
That's a question that deserves, I think, a lot more attention and scrutiny.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, we need to be honest about the economic forces that benefit from conflict and explore ways to create incentives for peace that are just as powerful.
Yeah, we can't just like ignore the elephant in the room.
Exactly.
Especially when that elephant is like costing the world trillions of dollars and countless lives.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes I think a specific conflict can really bring these broader issues into like really sharp focus.
Yeah.
One that came up both in the research paper and the Al Jazeera program was the ongoing situation in Gaza.
Right. Yeah. Gaza is...
It's just a like...
It's a really tragic example of how these global trends that we're talking about actually play out on a human level.
Yeah.
You know, the conflict's been going on for decades.
It's been going on for so long.
With just devastating consequences for everyone involved.
Right.
In 2023 alone, over 160,000 people were killed, and a staggering 110 million people were displaced from their homes because of conflict.
It's hard to even like wrap your head around numbers like that.
It is.
You know, those aren't just statistics. Those represent real people, real families whose lives have just been like shattered by this violence.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if Gaza is like a wake-up call for the world, you know?
Right.
Is it going to like force us to rethink our whole approach to conflict resolution?
Yeah.
Or will it just become another tragic chapter in this long and bloody story?
It's a question we all have to grapple with, and it's a question with implications that reach far beyond just Gaza.
Right, for sure.
Because, you know, as interconnected as the world is, the lessons we learn or the lessons we fail to learn from one conflict will inevitably shape how we deal with others.
That's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
And definitely something to keep in mind, I think, as we continue this whole, like, deep dive into this topic.
Right.
Okay, so I wanted to, like, switch gears a bit.
Okay.
And explore some of the insights that came from this Al Jazeera program.
Okay.
They had some really, like, interesting guests who brought, like, some unique perspectives to the table.
Yeah, they did. They had experts like Dan Smith from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, who has a deep understanding of the global arms trade. They also had Ravi Agrawal, the editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine, who brings a really keen eye for the geopolitical landscape. So hearing their insights, I think, really adds another layer to this whole discussion.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so let's unpack what they had to say. One thing that really struck me was this idea that, like, maybe World War II never really ended. Which, I mean, it sounds a bit radical.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, like, it kind of...
Moain Rabbani, who's a fellow at the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. He argued that instead of like a clean break and this like lasting peace, we've just transitioned into a new era of these proxy wars and these regional conflicts. You know, they're often fueled by superpower rivalries, but these conflicts still carry like these echoes of that global conflict. It's like the world never really learned its lesson.
Right. And now it's like with all these new powers, like China rising and countries like Russia, you know, asserting themselves on the world stage. It feels like the dynamics are shifting again.
They are. And it's like...
And that could be dangerous. Because it creates, you know, more room for miscalculation and misunderstanding.
It's almost like the old rule book is being thrown out. Exactly. Nobody's quite sure what the new rules are.
Right. And when the rules of the game aren't clear, it's just easier for things to spiral out of control.
Right. It's like trying to play chess.
And the other player keeps, like, making up new moves.
Exactly.
And then, as if that weren't enough to worry about.
Right.
We've also got this, like, looming threat of climate change, which, you know, that brings a whole new level of complexity to the mix.
Climate change isn't just an environmental issue. It's a security issue.
Yeah, for sure. The Al Jazeera program talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, Ravi Agrawal argued that climate change is going to exacerbate existing tensions and also, like, create entirely new flashpoints for conflict.
Yeah, so we're talking, like, rising sea levels, displacing entire populations. We're talking like droughts, famines leading to instability, competition for resources becoming even more fierce. Like climate change is throwing gasoline on this already like raging fire.
It is, and this is where the interconnectedness of all these issues, I think it becomes even more apparent.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, conflict, climate change, poverty, inequality, they're all intertwined.
Yeah.
And ignoring one while you try to solve the others, it's not going to work.
Right.
We need like a more holistic approach that recognizes the complexity of all of these challenges and seeks solutions that address the root causes.
It's a tall order.
It is.
But it feels like the only way forward.
Yeah.
If we want to create like a truly peaceful and sustainable future.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a question for part 2. I'll take a quick pause here. When we come back, we'll delve into some potential solutions and explore what a more peaceful future might actually look like. Sounds good.
Yeah. Stay tuned. Okay. Welcome back. So I'm really eager to kind of dig into some of these some potential solutions, right, to all these challenges that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed, right, when you think about the sheer scale of global conflict and how it's all connected to these other crises. But I do think there are some glimmers of hope.
Yeah.
In the sources that you shared.
Yeah, I can definitely feel like we're like staring down this massive tangled mess with like no way out.
Yeah.
But I think like human history has always been this mix, right, of conflict and cooperation.
Yeah.
And so even amidst like all this chaos, there are people who are like working tirelessly to try and build, a better future.
They are. And the Al Jazeera program highlighted some of these efforts. Dan Smith, for instance, emphasized that while the UN might need some reform, it has still achieved some really significant things in promoting peace and international cooperation.
That's a good point. I think we often focus so much on like the UN's shortcomings that we kind of forget that it has played like this crucial role
for sure
in preventing like countless conflicts and alleviating human suffering.
Totally.
So maybe the answer isn't to like scrap the UN altogether, but to just find ways to like make it more effective in the 21st century.
Exactly. And in the program, Ravi Agrawal, he even suggested a potential avenue for reform, restructuring the Security Council to better reflect kind of the current global power dynamics.
Okay.
So, while it's definitely a contentious issue, revisiting who holds veto power and how decisions are made, that could potentially address some of these concerns about fairness and representation.
It makes sense. I mean, the world has changed a lot since the UN was founded, and clinging to these like outdated structures might actually be doing more harm than good.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But I think reform isn't just about like institutions, it's also about like shifting our mindsets.
Yeah. Absolutely. We need to move beyond this idea that security is this zero-sum game, where one country's gain is another's loss.
Right.
We're all interconnected. We
are.
Our security is ultimately interdependent.
Right. So what happens in one corner of the world inevitably impacts everyone else.
Yeah.
You can't just build walls and pretend that like global problems will magically disappear.
Exactly.
And the research paper you shared actually offered some pretty like concrete steps towards like building a more peaceful future. Yeah. One of the key takeaways was like the importance of investing in conflict prevention.
Right.
Which, I mean, it sounds kind of obvious.
It does.
But we often spend way more resources reacting to conflict after they've already like erupted than we do trying to prevent them in the first place.
It's like waiting until your house is on fire to install a smoke detector.
Exactly. It just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. We need to shift our focus from firefighting to fireproofing.
I like that.
Yeah. And that means investing in things like diplomacy, early warning systems, conflict resolution mechanisms.
So basically we need to be more proactive and less reactive.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think prevention isn't just about like stopping wars from breaking out.
Right.
It's also about like addressing those underlying causes of conflict.
Things like poverty, inequality, discrimination.
Yeah, you can't build lasting peace on a foundation
of injustice.
No. If people feel like the system is like rigged against them, they're more likely to like resort to violence to achieve their goals.
Like trying to put out a fire by pouring water on the flames, but ignoring the burning embers underneath.
Yeah, you got to address like the source.
You got to get to the source
of the problem, to truly like extinguish them.
Exactly. And it highlights the importance of fostering, this culture of peace.
Okay, so what does like a culture of peace actually look like?
Well, I think it starts with education.
Okay.
Teaching people about conflict resolution, about nonviolent communication, about the importance of empathy.
Right.
I think it means promoting dialogue and understanding across cultural and ideological divides. And it means creating systems that address grievances fairly and peacefully.
Right. So people don't feel like violence is their only option.
Exactly. It's about changing hearts and minds, not just laws and institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can feel like a little overwhelming, right?
It can.
When you think about how do we actually like create this?
Yeah.
But the research paper also highlights that like change often starts at the grassroots level.
Right.
Individuals can play a role in creating a more peaceful world.
Every act of kindness, every conversation, every effort to bridge divides, that all contributes to a more peaceful society.
So what can we do as individuals? Like what are some like concrete steps we can take in our own lives to like promote peace?
Well, for starters, I think just educate yourself. Learn about the root causes of conflict, both globally and in your own community.
Yeah. So like read books, listen to podcasts.
Exactly.
Have conversations with people who have different perspectives.
Exactly. And then once you have like a better understanding of the issues, you can start to take action.
Okay. So like support organizations.
Yeah. Support organizations
that are working to promote peace and justice.
Yeah.
Get involved, like local initiatives aimed at addressing inequality and discrimination.
Yeah.
Advocate for policies that prioritize diplomacy and conflict prevention.
Yeah. So use your voice, use your time.
Right.
Use your resources to try and create positive change.
But don't underestimate the power of just like being kind and compassionate in your daily interactions.
Yeah. I think building a culture of peace starts with how we treat each other.
Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the big like global picture.
Right.
But sometimes like the most impactful actions are happening on a personal level.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Yeah.
And while I think individual actions are really essential, we also need systemic change.
Yeah.
We need to address those economic forces that are actually profiting from war and shift our priorities.
Right, as a society. It's not enough to just like talk about peace. We have to like invest in it, right?
We do.
And that means like redirecting resources from like the military industrial complex to initiatives that are like promoting sustainable development, diplomacy, conflict resolution.
Exactly. Imagine what we could achieve if we spent even like a fraction of the trillions of dollars that are wasted on war, on building a more just and equitable world.
Yeah, and that brings us back to that statistic. $19.1 trillion.
It's a lot of money
spent on war and its consequences. In a single year.
It's more than enough money.
I mean, that's more than enough money to end world hunger.
Right.
Provide clean water to everyone.
Yeah.
Invest in renewable energy infrastructure.
Exactly.
That could like help mitigate climate change.
It really puts things in perspective.
It does.
Yeah.
We have the resources to create a better future.
To do.
It's just a matter of choosing to use them wisely.
Yeah.
And making those choices requires us to be like informed and engaged citizens.
Right, exactly. Which is what this whole
deep dive is about.
So to recap, we've explored this complex landscape of global conflict.
Right.
We've talked about the challenges that are facing existing institutions.
Right.
And we've talked about the need for both, like individual and systemic change.
Exactly.
But there's one more, I think, crucial piece of this puzzle.
Yeah.
And that's like the role of hope, right?
You're right. It's easy to feel, I think, really discourged when you're confronted with the scale of these challenges. Yeah. But despair is a luxury that we can't afford.
We can't afford to give in to that feeling.
No.
Yeah, we have to like believe that a better future is possible and work towards it with this like unwavering determination.
And we need to inspire others to join us in that effort.
Yeah, because building a more peaceful world, it requires a collective effort. It requires
all of us.
All of us.
Yeah.
So let's take a moment here, of like reflect on everything we've talked about so far.
Okay.
And then when we come back for the final part of this deep dive, we'll explore how we can actually turn these insights into action.
Okay.
And leave you with some final thought
to ponder. Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've explored, this kind of sobering reality of global conflict risk and the shortcomings of the current peacekeeping efforts.
Right.
But we've also found some glimmers of hope. But now I think the big question is, what can we actually do with all this information? Like, how do we shift from awareness to action?
That's the crucial next step, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's a question that both of your sources kind of touch on in different ways.
Okay.
The research paper, for example, really highlights the power of individual choices.
Right.
Even though global problems can feel, so massive.
Oh, yeah.
Our daily actions really do contribute to the kind of world we're creating.
I like that. It is empowering.
Yeah.
Remember that we're not just passive bystanders.
Yeah, we're not powerless.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But what kind of actions are we talking about here? Is it all about donating to charities or protesting?
Right.
What if someone feels like they don't have the time or the resources for that kind of stuff?
I don't think it's just about the grand gestures, I remember that culture of peace we were talking about?
Yeah.
That starts with how we interact with each other every single day, choosing empathy over judgment, having difficult conversations with respect, even just being mindful of the language we use.
Okay.
These things matter.
So it's almost like practicing peace in our own lives can create this ripple effect.
It can. I think so.
Okay. But what about the bigger picture stuff?
Yeah.
Can individual choices really impact things like global military spending?
Right.
Or the UN Security Council?
Well, I think individual actions add up to collective movements. So, voting for leaders, right?
Or prioritize diplomacy over conflict. Okay. Supporting businesses with ethical practices. Even just talking about these issues with your friends and family.
Yeah.
These choices send signals to those in power.
Right, okay.
And remember, those massive institutions are ultimately made up of individuals, too.
Oh, that's a good point. So, change can also come.
It can.
From within those systems as well.
It can.
Yeah, okay. But honestly, sometimes it feels like those in power are more interested in maintaining the status quo than rocking the boat,
Yeah.
How do we push for change when it seems like those at the top are resistant?
That's where I think awareness and public pressure becomes so crucial.
Okay.
So more people understand how interconnected these challenges really are.
Yeah. The harder it becomes to ignore them.
Okay.
The Al Jazeera program, for instance, highlighted the link between climate change and conflict.
Right.
That's not something that policymakers can easily brush aside.
Right. So it's about kind of connecting the dots.
Connecting the dots, yeah.
For people, helping them see how these seemingly distant issues actually impact their lives.
Exactly.
It's like that saying, think globally, act locally.
Exactly. Yeah. And find those local actions that align with your values and your skills.
Okay.
So maybe, you're really passionate about education.
Yeah.
Volunteer to teach conflict resolution skills in your community. Maybe you're a tech whiz.
Right.
Explore how technology can be used to promote peace-building efforts.
Okay. So many possibilities.
There are.
Yeah, it's about finding your own little niche.
Yeah, find your niche.
Where your passions intersect with the need for change.
Exactly.
But honestly, sometimes it all just feels so overwhelming.
Yeah, it can.
Where do we even start?
Right.
What's the one piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to make a difference but doesn't know where to begin?
I would say start by asking yourself, what breaks your heart about the state of the world?
Okay.
What injustices make you angry?
Okay.
What kind of future do you want for yourself and for future generations? I think those answers will guide you towards the actions that feel most meaningful.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice. Finding that thing that really sparks your passion.
Exactly.
And then once you've like found that thing, don't be afraid to like speak up.
Yeah, speak up.
Share your concerns. Challenge the status quo.
Challenge the status quo, yeah. Remember, even small actions can ripple outward and create this wave of change.
Yeah.
And never underestimate the power of hope.
Totally.
Cynicism is contagious.
Yeah.
But so is optimism.
So true.
Huh.
It's been a heavy topic.
It has.
But I actually feel more hopeful after this deep dive.
That's great.
You know, we've gained this like deeper understanding of the challenges we've explored, like potential solutions.
Yeah.
And most importantly, I think we've recognized our own agency.
Yeah, our own power.
Shaping a more peaceful future.
And that's what I love about these deep dives. They're not just about like absorbing information, you know.
Right, it's about doing something.
It's about empowering you to actually do something.
Yeah. Exactly. So to our listener, you know, we encourage you to keep exploring these issues. To find your own path to action.
Right.
And to never give up hope.
Never give up hope.
We've included some additional resources on our website.
Right.
But the most important resource is you.
Yeah, you got it.
Your passion, your voice, your commitment to creating a better world.
A better world, yeah.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Thanks for listening.